I'm John Luck with Jeff Fowler as we talk about this winter storm coming up on Tuesday into Wednesday. But with this system, it gives people maybe a flashback to 24 years ago when this little system barreled up the East Coast and deemed the storm of the century. Now, granted, there's some similarities, maybe with just the calendar, but both systems very capable of dumping 2, maybe 3 feet of snow.
So whenever there's a big storm, everybody likes to look at history. They like to compare to some of the benchmark storms, and the Superstorm of '93 certainly was one of them. Everybody looks at '78. More recently, they might look at Nemo. So since it's March 13th, it is the anniversary after all, we thought it'd be kind of cool to show you this satellite imagery. This is not today's storm system, but it's going to have some similarities in its effects on New England, not so much south. Remember, this storm actually was born in the Gulf of Mexico. The current storm is going to be more born off the southeast coast. So there are some minor differences there, but this was quite a system.
Mention the snow capabilities of the storm back in '93 and what we're going to get as we take a look at the snow amounts from 1993. Again, 24 years ago, not what we're getting, but maybe the general idea. Massachusetts, we had 4 to 10 inches in Plymouth, Bristol counties, the Cape and Islands. But really, it's when you get back into New York, Pennsylvania, areas like that, that the snow really stacked up, talking 2, 3, even more feet.
Well, this was a storm system that just banked right up against the Appalachians. You had a lot of science going on there, especially in the southern half, a lot of uplift, and they had some tremendous snows. That's not going to happen down there, but I like the general idea of the heaviest snowfall being along an I-95 corridor and points north and west. I think ultimately that's what's going to happen with this system.
So talked about the similarities here. With the storm that we have coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday, we have the energy down in the Gulf of Mexico. We have the precipitation coming from Canada going across the Great Lakes. Eventually, they're going to meet up. Now, as we take a look at the track from the 1993 storm, you see that we have the arrow, and this is just about the same route that our system tomorrow is going to be taking.
Right, so we look at blizzards. Sometimes we call them nor'easters. We call them winter hurricanes. And that's kind of how the '93 system was, as it was born in the Gulf of Mexico, tracked by a lot of severe weather towards the southeastern coast. Florida was hit pretty strong with that system. Then it kind of made its way up the coastline. Again, a lot of snow in the deep south areas that generally don't have a lot of snow. This system is going to be born more off the southeastern coast, but interestingly enough, we did have hurricane hunters fly into the system over the weekend to kind of get some more data and kind of give us an idea of what we're dealing with.
All right, so now that's back in 1993. Let's fast forward to 2017, and here's what we're talking about. Now, down here, that's where you have your energy. Back here is where you have your precipitation. They're going to meet up, according to this model, just off the Mid-Atlantic coastline, which could still pack a punch on the I-95 corridor.
Right, I think this is a pretty good idea of what we're going to have. Here's your parent low that's going to be forming. It already is this afternoon. We'll show you the radar in a second. But off the Carolina coast, Georgia coastline right now is where our primary system is being born, and it's going to make its way up the coastline. Meanwhile, this is the upper level low that's also going to be a steering component to the system, and it's depending on how deep this upper level low is, that will determine the exact track of this system.
So there's going to be a lot of elements with the storm as we take a look at the storm threats. And when you talk about winter system, obviously we are in a winter storm warning coming up until the end of tomorrow night, and I wouldn't be surprised if that gets extended into Wednesday. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the blizzard severity, now there's those criteria that we need to meet a blizzard, but obviously you need 3 hours of falling, blowing, drifting snow, visibility of less than a quarter mile, heavy wind gusts, which brings us to the wind damage. And I think that's going to be the thing that goes along with the storm as we talk about it in the future here. The fact that the wind was just so strong. We'll get to that in a little bit as well, but so many different elements. Bridgewater, I think we're going to be based on winds.
Yeah, the wind damage for sure, that's going to be a major story, especially along the coast, but I think maybe inland as far as Worcester County, so that will be something we'll keep an eye on. Winter storm, obviously, that's on the table. I think areas in Massachusetts will realize blizzard criteria. Bridgewater is going to be close. It's really going to depend on tomorrow mid-afternoon between the hours of 1 and 5 p.m. If we're snowing during that time, I think we have a shot of getting into the blizzard criteria, but there's going to be some mixing going on too, which we'll talk about in a moment.
So again, notice up here, this event's taking place tomorrow from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., but there could still be some snow showers. That won't add a lot, but just kind of salt in the wound there as we take a look at the radar. And you're going to see here's what we're talking about. You got the energy from the Gulf of Mexico. You got the snow going across the Great Lakes. They're going to meet up and give us one heck of an event coming up tomorrow.
And one thing you notice if you look closer here, you see thunderstorms developing along just to the south of this front. And also a lot of storms now firing up in Georgia and the Carolinas, right off the Carolina coastline. all of this area is going to start to come together. You can see a lot of energy overnight tonight, and then it's going to start to make its way on up.
Definitely a lot of severe storms, it looks like, going across Tennessee into Alabama as well. So there's one image that we haven't taken a look at, and that's the 500 millibars. So this is something that you maybe don't see on your Boston forecast, but this is something that they use to talk about the forecast. So looking at this, what does this tell you about the storm tomorrow?
All right, so we're going up in the air, 500 millibars, 18,000 feet. Okay, that's where our jet stream is. That's where our steering currents are. That's what's moving the system. And as we go through it, you can see the system kind of digging down. This is the system that was in the Midwest. That's your upper level low. That's your trough that's forming, and you'll notice towards the end of the frame, there's going to be a little bit of a what we call a vorticity right here. So it's going to come around. It actually started in the Northwest this weekend. It actually started off the Gulf of Alaska. It's going to come right across the country, and then it starts to steer its way up the coastline. Now, how close to the coastline it gets, that will determine if we have a rain-snow line involved. I think we will.
All right, so let's talk about tonight. Tonight, as far as weather-wise in New England, we're fine. It's the calm before the storm. Meanwhile, the rest of the eastern seaboard here, they have a lot of precipitation coming, and this is kind of the infancy stages of this massive storm that we have.
Right, so we have storm system gathering off the southeast coast. We have rain. We have some thunderstorms moving through Florida, Georgia, South Carolina. It's going to start to move up, obviously, into the colder air. That rain's going to turn into snow eventually. They'll start off a little bit of rain south of D.C., but eventually they'll go over to snow. Here's the upper level low back here towards Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and that's going to probably drop 3 to 6 inches of snowfall for them.
All right, so Tuesday, as we switch forward to Tuesday, and this is game day as far as the weather is concerned, snow barrels up the East Coast, hits New England very hard. We're talking a good amount of snow for most of the region. As you go further inland, that's where you're talking about your heavier snowfall amounts, but still, this storm still has some building to do, so it can potentially change.
Right, so this is the midday map. So one important thing to know, when you wake up early tomorrow morning, if you're an early riser, 6 a.m., 7 a.m., you look outside, there may not be a ton going on. It may have just started snowing, might be a little mixed, the roads might be wet. You might be getting up saying, this is no big deal. You're going to head off to work, you're going to think nothing of it. Getting into work, you might be okay. It's when you're traveling home that you're going to be dealing with some adverse conditions, which we'll talk about in a moment. But here we are again. This is Tuesday late morning. We have now the low moving up, probably off somewhere in the Delmarva Peninsula at that point. There's a lot of snow going on for most of us, but you can see rain areas starting to creep in, and that's something we'll have to keep an eye on.
So there's been one term tossed around with this storm, and that's the word bombogenesis. And for that to happen, it would have to take place right around here. We see that low right off of the mid-Atlantic, 996. So for some people that hear bombogenesis and think, wow, we're going to get a huge storm, we are going to get a big storm, but what's the reasoning behind the bombogenesis?
So bombogenesis it refers to a rapid deepening of a storm system. It's when the barometric pressure drops very rapidly in a short period of time. And that's when you get your heaviest snowfall rates. It's not when the storm's reached its peak, which it will do, by the way, and probably in the Gulf of Maine by, I would say, maybe late Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. But it's really the hours leading up to that. So it's as the storm passes by our area. And that's important because when that happens, snowfall rates can be 2, 3, 4 inches per hour. So areas that are snowing are going to get dumped with a lot of snowfall tomorrow afternoon. Areas that are mixing, obviously, not as much, but they may have a lot of heavy sleet involved. But that's really when the storm will be at its worst effects for our area, which again is probably going to be about mid-afternoon tomorrow.
Also a key ingredient for thundersnow, as we had thundersnow during the last storm, there's a good potential for us to get some thundersnow coming up tomorrow. So Jeff, you alluded to it earlier, the travel impact here, and if you are an early riser, 5 a.m., I don't know if you know what 5 a.m. looks like, but still good driving conditions on the highways. By the time you get to 9 a.m., that's when the snow is starting to fall, maybe starting to stick a little bit to the roadways, but you can still make your way around. The later you get into the day, though, that's kind of the idea we're driving home here. By 1 o'clock, that's the height of the storm. By 5 o'clock, that's when we're talking about maybe the end of the height of the storm. Either way, from, I want to say 12 to 6, you want to stay off the roadways because if you have snowfall rates of 2, 3, 4 inches an hour, snowplows can't humanly keep up with that rate.
So I'm not really a big believer of hyping and telling everybody the world's going to end. I'm not really into that. But I will tell you, some of us do have to work tomorrow. That's just the way it is. So for the adults that do have to go in regardless, best advice is to allow yourself some extra time in the morning. Get in there. If you want to avoid the conditions altogether, get in early in the morning. And then, stay over a little bit later after work. Maybe grab some dinner, a nice establishment near your work. Stay off the roads if you can. I think if you plan to drive home later tomorrow night, I won't say you'll be fine, but you'll have a better shot of avoiding some of the treacherous conditions, especially if we do start to mix. And if that storm system comes a little closer to us, we could even get what they call a dry slot. And so what happens is if you get very close to the center of the storm, your conditions improve dramatically, and it's almost like being in the eye of the system, so the precipitation can sometimes stop or move just to our west. There's no guarantee it's going to happen, but if it does, it may be around the 7 or 8 o'clock period tomorrow night. So, if you're willing to go in early and stay a little later, come home a little later tomorrow night, that will improve conditions. The big thing with the road crews is that they can't do their job if there's a bunch of vehicles on the road in front of them. So if you want a better travel on Wednesday, it's best to let the crews do their thing tomorrow.
It's almost that repeat of a few years ago when school buses and trucks were stuck on the
Yes.
highway.
Right.
You don't want that. Now, this is all based on precipitation. Now, the other element of the storm is the wind. And we're talking about extremely strong wind gusts coming up as we take a look at the next slide. And sustained winds, you talk about Nantucket. Obviously, they're close to the coastline. They're closest to the center of the storm. This is almost like that hurricane as you're close to the eye. These are sustained wind gusts for 1 o'clock coming up on Tuesday. Nantucket, 43 miles an hour. Even the coast of Boston, 40 miles an hour. And look at Bridgewater, still a sustained wind of 40 miles an hour expected for 1 p.m. on Tuesday. Now, something you don't see is the wind gusts. Nantucket could be pushing 70 miles an hour. Bridgewater could be pushing 50, 55 miles an hour, and that could be an issue when we talk about power.
And I think that's really going to be your headlines tomorrow. You can't do your job if the power is out, right? So that's something to consider too. And Bridgewater, let's be honest, is known for its power outages. Even when the sun's shining, it does happen. Whether you get 6 inches of snow or 16 inches of snow, cement, wet, heavy snow on the power lines, on the tree branches, the fact that we've gone through a pretty significant drought, we still have that going, so the trees are weak, the roots are weak. Now you're dumping 40 to 60 mile per hour winds along with heavy snow at some point. That could cause some problems.
The sustained wind for Bridgewater, I have them at 40 miles an hour at 1 o'clock on Tuesday. Now, something to point out here is we're going to have heavy winds up above 30 miles an hour up until about 5 o'clock. Now, power companies can't go up in their buckets until the wind reaches below a certain criteria, so I believe that's 30 miles an hour or so. So if the power does go out at 1 o'clock, it is going to take some time for the power to come back on, which brings us to the winter storm tips, because I think these are pretty important as we take a look here. Stay updated. Obviously, TV online. Now you have apps that send out text alerts. Charge your phones and even those portable battery packs. Sometimes if they get a full charge, they can charge your phone 5, 6 times. Plan to work from home tomorrow. I think that's maybe some of the best advice, because if you stay off the roads on Tuesday, Wednesday, the driving will probably be a little bit better, especially as you get closer to the highways, the main roads, 104, 18. Prepare for extended power outages. We talked about that. The snow and the wind coinciding together, creating some numerous power outages. The closer you get to the coast, the better your chance for losing power. And then one thing that I think kind of gets lost when we talk about these events here is if you do have a lot of snow around your exhaust pipes or maybe around your generators, you want to make sure that anything that holds exhaust fumes maybe gets cleared, because you don't want to become a statistic during a winter storm.
Right, that's important, especially with this type of snow. It's heavy, it's wet, it's gloppy, it's going to stick to everything. So if it happens to stick to any of your vents, that's going to be an issue, along with keeping the pipes clear in your car. Also your house, your dryer vents. That's usually one of the big ones. If you get snow drifting up or covering that, that can create some of the carbon monoxide issues.
Even after the storm too, you want to make sure your drain pipes are cleared out, because eventually that snow is going to melt and that water has to go somewhere. And this is that type of snow that we talk about, roof collapses. Now, we haven't had that big of a winter, so I don't think it'll be that big of an issue. But we take a look at the snow ratio here, and the bigger the odds, I guess if you want to call it, the fluffier the snow. So as you get back into western Massachusetts out by Springfield, Worcester, you're talking about an 11-to-1 ratio, 12-to-1 ratio. That's that snow that's easier to move, fluffier, maybe more blowing and drifting, can build up those snow drifts on the corners. However, once you go south of Boston, you're talking about 8-to-1 snow ratio, even on the Cape 6-to-1, 5-to-1. The closer the numbers, the heavier the snow.
Right, anytime you get to 8-to-1 or lower, that's what we call the heart attack snow, right? So that there's a lot of moisture content to it. It's almost like you're taking a shovel and picking up a gallon of water and trying to throw it over your shoulder. And so that does become an issue. So definitely wetter snow down here. And you're right, with the drier snow now, if you are heading west, perhaps if your commute takes you out towards Worcester County, that area, with the fluff factor involved, that snow could pile up very quickly.
And it should be worth noting here that we do have a blizzard watch in effect for Worcester down to Foxborough, up to Boston, down to Providence, and a blizzard warning from New Haven down to New London. So if you do drive on 95, that part of 95 is going to be borderline impossible to navigate through. Now, as you take a look at the snowfall amounts, one thing to point out here is the fact that we saw that snowfall ratio, so it looks like everyone's going to get pretty close to the same amount of liquid. However, we're in that buffer zone between the mix, the snow, and the rain.
Right, so Bridgewater is literally right on the line. I feel like that's the way every storm is in our area. So, we're thinking 4 to 8, but, 6 to 14 isn't that far away. Just the idea, you really have to focus in on tomorrow afternoon. So, I would say anywhere between 1 and maybe 6 p.m. If we're still snowing at that time, the snow's going to pile up very quickly. If we're more sleet and mix, it's just going to be more of that slushy. I'm thinking that we're probably going to be very close to that mix line. So I think the 4 to 8 might be more realized, but it's right on the line. So it's very close. It would not surprise me at all if we pile up a bit more than that. But I think ultimately Worcester County will probably be your big winners here. Maybe in some areas north and west of Boston. There's always going to be those bandings. You can't really tell until the storm gets going where those bands exactly are going to set up. But, you could be anywhere along the Metro West area. But again, whether it's 6 inches of cement snow or it's a foot of dry snow, the effects are going to be very similar. And I think the combination of that snow with the strong winds, that's really going to be the headlines for tomorrow.
And as far as shoveling out, this is the type of snow that you want to maybe keep up with, maybe go out there every couple hours, every 3 hours, just kind of move the snow every so often, because it's a little bit easier moving 2 inches of heavy concrete-like snow as opposed to moving a half foot to 8 inches of borderline concrete. So one thing that we've had working in our favor with a lot of these storms is the fact that the next day it's 60, 65, 70, and snow's gone. This time around, we look at the extended forecast, and, well, we're not going to do a lot of melting.
Right, we're not. What we will do is what we call sublimation. That's what happens this time of year, and it's actually, basically, it's the snow evaporating into the air because we have a stronger sun angle this time of year. So that will happen. So you will notice that, especially I'd say towards Thursday and Friday. Could also mean some fog in the morning. You're going to see that snow going back up into the atmosphere. But we're going to stay pretty cold. And again, by the time we get to next weekend, we'll take it one storm at a time here. But we could have another storm system to deal with here by Saturday, or more even likely late Saturday into Sunday, the way it looks right now.
All right, so again, from 8 a.m. till, I want to say about 5, 6 o'clock, that's the time that you want to really start to not think about going out on the roads, because it's going to be extremely dangerous by then. And once again, winter storm intensity major, and we want to see your pictures as you are enjoying the snow from inside your home, hopefully, or even outside building snowman. You can email them to a4n@btvaccess.com or jluck@btvaccess.com. We'll show them on BTV Right Now and Bridgewater this week. Jeff, thanks, and we'll see you coming up later on in the week on BTV Right Now.